Hey there, this is your host Des, and you're tuning in to DY Sensei, where we share knowledge from a variety of fields to help you maximize your health, relationships, and life's potential. Again, I'm Des, and I come from a background of preventive medicine and psychology, with a focus on keeping you healthy, happy, and out of the doctor's office. This month, we'll be focusing on setting the foundations for change. That's the right mindsets and the knowledge to help you believe that change in yourself is possible. In this episode, we'll be jumping into the concepts of balance and why it is so important in every aspect of our life. We'll explore different personality theories, dichotomies in our approach to different situations, and even the feelings we have. We'll be splitting this episode into two parts, with part 2 being next week, since there's just a whole lot for you to digest. All in all, you're going to see how balance plays a big role in all of these things. When you think of balance, what do you see? For me, it's a spectrum and being at the center of it. In other cases, it could be a balance scale that you see in those old days, with both sides being at an equal level. Then there's also yin-yang, a Chinese philosophy where light and dark halves make a whole. It symbolizes that all things may have a duality, that are opposite in nature, but they complement each other. They work together in harmony and form the whole. In any case, we can see that throughout history and even the current day and age, balance has always been a very important concept. It's even more important in this day when people are becoming more extreme in their behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. There's always external forces trying to push us or pull us into the extremes. Whether this is our political views or even down to our behaviors like our use of social media and technology. For this first exercise, take 30 seconds to think of one thing in your life where you are lacking balance. Take your time to think carefully and answer this question. Where are you lacking balance, and how does it look like? Okay, have you thought it through? Okay, so as we get further into this episode, we're just going to continue building on this thoughts of yours. Regardless of what it is, I'd like to imagine that those things are on the spectrum and we want to move towards the center. The idea of yin and yang is even more useful in understanding that all things have opposites, and those opposites have a place, and we need to maintain that balance. Each of the halves aren't just opposites, but there is also dots in each of the halves. They represent a little bits of the opposites existing in the other. Almost all things in nature exist in a dichotomy and work together to function as a whole. Imagine day and night. Could you go on without either? Or even the world, can it? Now let's look at some other examples. There's also men and women, masculinity and femininity, and sometimes even cats and dogs. Now, joking aside, even your muscles work in opposites and help you function properly. Imagine your biceps and triceps. Each of these help you move your forearm in opposite directions, but both are needed so you can bend and extend your forearm as you please. They're called antagonistic pairs for this reason. They work in opposites, antagonism, but the two are needed for you to operate your arm properly. Other muscles in your body function in the same way, When there's an imbalance, we experience some problems with misalignments, pain, and even dysfunction with that body part. We'll get a little bit more into this in the future on health and muscles though. Our world is really just full of so many opposites that can't exist without its counterparts. Think about freedom and responsibility. You can't have a fully functioning society if everybody has the freedom to do whatever they please, without consequences. Then there are places where people are told to responsibly follow set standards and norms without any freedom at all. And man, that's gonna feel like hell for those who have tasted freedom before. Now, after having given you these examples, let's re-examine what you were thinking about before. The place that in your life that's lacking balance. Now take 30 seconds and think and answer this next question. What does the opposite look like in your case? Okay, welcome back. The most important thing to realize is the importance of balance and to work towards it. Remember, it's not about blame, shame, or guilt. Those feelings might play a role in helping you change, but the focus is on acknowledgement and making that change. Whether this is in your behavior, feelings, thoughts, or even personality, all of these things can change when you strive to understand what the other side looks like. See things from a different perspective, and you'll be moved to make a more lasting change. This is especially the case in personality and disposition. There are probably a lot of times when we hear from ourselves or those we care about who say they can't change because it's a part of their personality, like personality is something that's unchangeable from birth. But well, the truth is, personality can change over time through experiences and a difference in perspective. Even biologically, our minds that are wired in a particular way can change, and that's a part of neuroplasticity. For those who haven't taken biology, or aren't good with it, or maybe they don't remember too much about the biology of our nervous system and cells, well, basically your nerve cells are called neurons, and they have these gaps between them called synapses that allow them to communicate with each other. There's these connections between neurons, synapses, that are very important in all functions of our mind, from emotion regulation, learning new things, and sometimes even recalling old memories. When you learn something new or go through a change, new connections are made between different neurons. And that is what we call neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our brain to reorganize those synaptic connections. If you want an analogy, imagine you're a big city and you function by having many people working inside you. Those people are technically your cells or neurons, and they need to communicate with each other in order to have specific jobs done around the city. And these jobs are the functions of the city or your brain. When the people in the city begin communicating with other people they haven't been connected to before, well, they begin to do new things. And that's essentially what neuroplasticity is like. The front side of our brain, called the frontal lobe, that plays a role in our personality, emotional control, and even judgments, is very involved in neuroplasticity. Because of this, remember, you can always change your personality, and it is supported biologically. So what is the whole point of talking about all of this? Let's go back to balance and take a look at the personality ocean, or the Big Five personality theory. That's the ocean personality theory, spelled OCEAN, like ocean waters, ocean. Ocean in this theory is an acronym for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Generally, people get into personality theories, they love to emphasize the positive sides of each of these traits. They think that if you're being open, conscientious, extroverted, agreeable, and less neurotic, that's for the best. Well, would you be surprised though if I told you that it's not necessarily the case? Openness allows for more learning and may make you seem more likable since you're open to new ideas and appear more understanding. But if you're completely open, you may not have certain ideas or values you stand firmly with, and you'll sway like the reeds in a wind. Even worse, if somebody is planning to take advantage of you, like a con artist or a salesperson from a pyramid scheme, you might take everything at face value and be duped. Conscientiousness means being thorough, organized, responsible, and goal-oriented. This is a trait I highly value, and you might think, oh, who would ever disagree with this trait, right? Well, can you be completely thorough and organized in every small thing you do? Probably not, because it takes a lot of time and energy. There's only so much energy and time you have. You'll need to prioritize which duties you need to be more conscientious with, and where you can lay off some bits. Now, extroverts and introverts, who do you like more? Most people find extroverts to be more enjoyable since they're the fun, outgoing, and sociable people. That's probably true, but did you know that there are probably a lot of introverts who are also sociable and maybe disguised as extroverts? We call them social introverts nowadays, and I probably fall into this category. Let me explain a little bit about a theory on extroversion, Han Eysenck's arousal theory on extroversion. In his theory, which is also supported by electroencephalographs, a measure of brain electrical activity, extroverts and introverts, they start off at different cortical arousals. Now, cortical arousal is the level of electrical activity in the brain. The amount of arousal determines how a person performs. In general, people tend to do better at a range of activities at optimal levels of arousal. Too high and the person is too stimulated, and too low, the person is not getting enough energy. Introverts tend to start off at a higher level of arousal than your extroverts. In order to reach an optimal level of arousal, extroverts get involved with others, like maybe getting into the crowds, to bring their arousal levels up. Meanwhile, introverts, when they're put into the same situation, they might get too much arousal beyond what is optimal. That makes them more uncomfortable and maybe even costs them more energy to maintain contacts with others. So it's for this reason introverts will avoid large gatherings and maybe not like being put into spotlights. Even social introverts like myself, we may seem outgoing and sociable, but we tend to avoid too large of a gathering. And when we are put into large gatherings, or maybe we're put into the company of others for too long of a time, like let's say a whole day, we'd be out of commission for the next day or maybe even a few days. Now, back to the idea of balance. we can see balance is important even in our cortical arousal, and how both introverts and extroverts interact with others to maintain an optimal level of arousal and performance. And that aside, it's still important for introverts to socialize well with others and show that they have good communication skills. Imagine if you're dealing with somebody who refuses to come out of their bubble and they sound disinterested when they're talking to you. On the other side, if you have an extrovert and they don't tone down their instincts of going out and socializing when they have tasks that they need to focus on and complete, they won't get things done. Even in terms of interacting with others, it's important for extroverts to be mindful when interacting with introverts. You'd understand what I mean if you've seen a couple where there's one introvert and the other is an extrovert. When the extrovert doesn't compromise for the introverts, it leads to a very disastrous relationship. Now, moving on to the next big 5 traits, we have agreeableness. This is the degree to which you agree or go along with the ideas of the other person. Now, let's be honest, who doesn't like it when somebody agrees with them? That's the whole reason we find friends who listen to us when we need to vent out or rant about something. There is one problem though. You might have to stifle your critical thinking if you only agree with others, or even if you do critically think. What's the point of it if you don't take proper action with it? Another common problem is that among people who are more feminine, they're too agreeable, and they don't stand up for their own inner thoughts, values, or even desires. Out of compassion and desire to not create any friction, now these are feminine traits, agreeableness might lead to outcomes that these people are dissatisfied with. They might get a lower pay since they won't disagree and demand for a higher wage or salary from their employer, or maybe when they're going on a date with their partner, they might be dissatisfied with the choice of restaurants, but they don't voice their opinions. Understanding this is one big reason why I really respect and admire people who disagree with me and speak out. It takes courage to create a little friction and hopes the other person will lend you an ear. It's always better to voice what you want so nobody develops resentments for not having their opinions or thoughts heard. The final big 5 traits is neuroticism. That's the tendency to experience negative emotions like anxiety, depression, irritability, and mood swings. People who are low in neuroticism tend to be more emotionally stable and resilient. Personally, I think that low neuroticism is better than being highly or moderately neurotic. But think of your favorite hero from a movie or story. What were they like? Did they show some form of vulnerability, or were they always the 100% cool, collected, powerful, and resilient people all the time? It was probably the first, right? The balance here is that we do still want to have negative emotions because it's a natural instinct to feel negative emotions in the face of turmoil and loss. Some degree of neuroticism allows us to appear vulnerable and relatable to others, making us more likable. That isn't to say that you should always be vulnerable and sensitive, because that's what makes the annoying characters in stories. We want them to man up, step up, or, conquer their inner turmoil. This goes to show that having total or no negative emotions isn't the way, because it just makes you seem robotic or unrelatable. I hope you can see how balance is so important after having given you so many examples. And here's the final question I have for you. What does balance look like in your case? And what do you have to do to achieve it? Alright, remember, many things in our world can be seen to have opposites, and no element is more superior than its counterparts. Each and everything has its fine place. Acknowledging and maintaining those balances in our life is just so important if we want to be realistic and achieve the results we want. Keep in mind the issues you have imbalance with this week, and work towards achieving that balance. Maybe it could be work-life balance, where you're spending too much time at work and need more time with family. Maybe you're gaming too much and need to be focused on other priorities. Or maybe you've been overbearing with your partner who's an introvert. Or you need to start standing up for yourself instead of being too agreeable. And that's a wrap for this episode. Be sure to check out our next episode, Part 2 on balance in achieving happiness in our social interactions and even emotions. If you've enjoyed this episode, please tune in to our next episodes every Tuesday morning. If you found it engaging or helpful, please give your feedback in the comments. Make sure you rate and follow the podcast. And share it with your friends and family. The success of this podcast hinges on this, and if you don't, I won't be balanced in my own mental health. If you have any questions or you want to share your knowledge or experiences on this podcast, be sure to contact me at dysensei at dysstudios.com. That's dysensei at dysstudios.com. With that said, class dismissed.